Close your eyes and take a deep breath. Today I invite you into a legend where speed was more than a gift, and beauty was never a simple blessing. In the high mountains of ancient Arcadia, a child once left to the mercy of the wild survived in a way no one expected. Raised among hunters, guarded by the silence of forests, and shaped by the shadow of Artemis, Atalanta grew into a woman no ordinary life could contain. She could outrun men, challenge heroes, and stand among the greatest names of Greek legend without lowering her eyes. Yet the same strength that made her unforgettable also made her impossible to claim. For every man who wished to marry her, she set one condition. He had to defeat her in a race, and if he failed, the cost would be final. But every legend has the moment when certainty begins to tremble. Into Atalanta's path came Hippomenes, a young man who first judged the madness of those who raced for her, until he saw her with his own eyes. He knew he could not outrun her by strength alone, so he turned to Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and received 3 golden apples from a sacred tree. During the race, each apple fell like a small piece of fate, shining on the ground, calling Atalanta away from the path she had sworn to protect. Was she defeated by love, by divine power, by her own hidden desire, or by the destiny she had tried so hard to escape? Tonight, we follow the race that changed her life forever. Before we begin this epic, I have a small request that means a lot to me. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. The greatest reward for all the effort I put into creating these epics is your support through subscribing to my channel. If you enjoy my content and want me to continue creating more, your subscription and like truly give me great motivation. Also, don't forget to share your thoughts with me in the comments. Your comments not only encourage me, but also help me understand what kind of epics and stories you would like to see on this channel. Thank you so much in advance for your support. Take a deep breath, relax your mind, and let the rhythm of this ancient legend guide you. Wishing you a peaceful sleep. The epic of Atalanta and the Golden Apples, the race that changed her fate, begins now. The first night of the girl born in the house of Iasus did not belong to the warmth of a home. It belonged to the wind of the mountain. Taken from the arms of her mother, Calydon, the small child was carried into the heights of Arcadia after the quiet decision of a father who had wanted a son. The old stories said the girl was left near the rocky slopes of Mount Parthenion, close to a spring and thick trees. There, human speech ended. The sound of leaves, the cold of stone, and the cries of night birds began. The baby had no name yet. Her fate waited not in the softness of a palace bed, but among shadows spread over the ground. The reason she had been left there was plain. Her father had wanted a boy, not a girl, but the mountain did not accept that human judgment. Night did not swallow the child. It hid her. Near dawn, a she-bear came out from the rocks. She did not come like a predator closing in on prey. She came like a grieving creature still carrying the scent of lost cubs. When the baby cried, the bear stopped. The voice of a human infant was strange to the mountain. The moment felt like a quiet sign from the gods. The animal turned toward a child that was not her own and fed her instead of harming her. So Atalanta, before she had even received the name Atalanta, lived through her first rejected breaths on the milk of the wild. That event spread across her life like a silent mark. Human order had cast her out, but the mountain had not refused her. No matter how fast she would later run, that first shelter would remain behind her like a shadow. When hunters noticed the bear returning to the same place, they first thought she had hidden prey. But when they followed her tracks, they found not an animal's kill, but a baby preserved between life and death. During the bear's absence, they lifted the small body from near the stones. They were amazed that cold and hunger had not defeated her. The child looked at these men who did not speak the language of the mountain. She had not stopped crying completely, and she did not fully trust them. The hunters gave her a name and carried her into their cabins, fires, and hard way of life. From that day on, Atalanta grew not with lullabies in a mother's room, but with barking dogs, drawn bows, cracking wood, and men preparing for the morning hunt. Those who found her did not know they had saved a princess. They only knew the mountain had placed an extraordinary child in their hands. The hunters fed her, protected her, and watched her when she learned to walk. Yet from the beginning she had a different kind of attention. She could not sit long beside the fire. She looked through the open door toward the mountain slope. When the wind changed, she turned her head. Before the dogs barked, she sensed movement far away. She loved water because the stories said she had been left near a spring, as if her body remembered that cold flow before anything else. The women among the hunters tried to teach her to spin wool, carry vessels, and wait near the hearth. She reached instead for curved branches that felt like bows, learned balance on stones, and came to know the hardness of the earth under her feet. This was not a planned rebellion. It was the quiet continuation of the direction the mountain had given her from birth. As the years passed, her body and gaze moved away from the path of ordinary children. Old descriptions remembered her sun-reddened face, naturally golden hair, and body strengthened by mountain exercise. Her beauty was not an ornament kept indoors. It was a light that appeared and disappeared inside motion. Those who saw her said she was both beautiful and unsettling, because Atalanta had not been raised to lower her eyes. People who looked at her saw not only a girl, but the forest's own answer. Some whispered that the gods had protected her. Others thought there was something disturbing in a child raised on the milk of a bear. Atalanta did not search for herself in those words. Her true measure was how her feet touched rock, how her arrow found its mark, and where the dogs fell silent over a trail. Even before she knew her past, fate prepared for her not a narrow road, but an open mountainside. The hunters first thought her speed was a game. The child ran from one hill shadow to another, left the dogs behind, and crossed stream stones without losing balance. Then the speed stopped being play. When they followed deer tracks, she did not fall behind the men. Sometimes she found the way back before they did. In this way, the pain of her abandonment slowly became a source of power. The father who had left her could not take back the mountain's daughter, because nature had hidden her first and then trained her by its own laws. As smoke from the hunters' cabins rose into evening, Atalanta became each day less like a child of human rooms and more like a being of Artemis's shadowed woods. The old details about the place where she was left make the scene feel like more than abandonment. They make it feel like a strange agreement between fate and nature. There may have been a cave nearby, a rocky descent and cold water. These details make the place harsh but also enclosed enough to protect her. She had not been left in the middle of an open plain. She seemed to have been placed in a hollow hidden inside the mountain itself. That is why those who later thought about Atalanta's childhood found it hard to call her survival mere chance. A human hand had cast her out, but the place, with its water, shade, and secrecy, had held her. Such a beginning helps explain why she would later return again and again to open air, rock, water, and forest paths. Her first home was not a human house, but a wild place on the edge between danger and shelter. When the hunters took her in, naming became the second step of fate. The baby was no longer only abandoned. She became a child who could be called among people. Yet even that name came not from a neat royal line, but from the witness of people living at the mountain's edge. The hunters saw in her both a fragility that needed protection and a toughness they could not explain. They may have loved her like one of their own, yet they always kept her a little apart, because the story of the bear's milk was not easy to forget. Before Atalanta learned to speak, she had already been divided between two worlds. People gave her a name, fire, and shelter. Nature gave her first strength and first loneliness. The later conflicts of her life grew from the fact that these gifts never fully joined. Atalanta's extraordinary nature was not tied to a loud display of superhuman power. It was tied to the unexpected protection of the wild. The gods did not step openly onto the scene, yet the order of events seemed guided by something unseen. The bear, the hunters, the spring, and the mountain hollow came together like parts of one fate. Before Atalanta met goddesses, heroes, and sacred places, she already appeared to be under the care of a world larger than human judgment. Her story began not with royal honor, but with a child nature had not forgotten, and the child the mountain had kept would soon begin to make her name heard in the wind. As Atalanta neared youth, the mountain became more than a refuge. It became a school. She learned the narrow paths that fell from the rocks, where oak and pine shadows grew darker, and which bird call revealed which hidden animal. When the hunters first took her with them, they watched her to protect her. Soon they began to follow her lead. Atalanta did not look only at the ground when she tracked. She read broken grass, the coolness of the air, the small pauses of dogs, and the unease inside silence all at once. The old stories said that when she grew, she always went armed and lived by hunting in the wild. This was not a show of violence. It looked like the natural order by which she protected herself. The bow in her hand was not decoration. It was part of her breathing. Her arrows were decisions that spoke without raised voices. Artemis held a place in her life as strong as a vow. The goddess of the hunt, of mountains and maidenhood, seemed more real to her than any human house. Atalanta's closeness to Artemis did not show through great ceremonies. It appeared in daily acts, bending over water at dawn, dividing the hunt with care, refusing to draw her bow without need, and turning her road away from the gaze of men. Artemis was not a later decoration placed on Atalanta's bond with dogs, bows, and mountain mornings. The goddess became the natural law of her life. Atalanta's body was fast, her eyes sharp, and her will closed. Yet behind those qualities was not a wish to imitate a goddess. It was a soul suited to a goddess's world. When others spoke of marriage, family, and lineage, she trusted the loneliness the mountain had taught her. Her beauty grew inside that loneliness. The old images did not remember her as a pale girl hidden indoors. They remembered a hunter browned by sun, shaped by running, with a fierce gaze and a body strengthened by habit. Her hair did not look bright because someone had dressed it. It shone by itself in the light. The red in her face came not from shyness but from open air and mountain weariness. Those who saw her were struck by her beauty and by the way she did not lower her eyes. She did not stand still to be watched. She appeared from a path, drew every gaze for a moment, and vanished behind a tree or a curve in the slope. So when her name spread, people did not speak only of beauty. They spoke of a young woman difficult to see, impossible to catch, and dangerous to approach without courage. The life she chose may have looked peaceful from far away, but the mountains did not keep danger from her. Two centaurs, Rhoecus and Hylaeus, were remembered as part of the first great test of her life. Their aggressive desire showed how firm Atalanta's solitude had to be. She did not wait for someone else to save her. She drew her bow, held her place, and stopped those who tried to force their way toward her at the distance she chose. Without harsh detail, that moment changed her place in the world. The young woman of the mountains became more than a swift hunter. She became someone who drew her own boundary, knew threat when it came, and did not retreat. This attitude would later appear again in her condition for marriage. For Atalanta, freedom was not a pleasant idea. It was a real line that had to be defended. In time, her home also became part of the legend. It was imagined high in Arcadia, in a valley of water, with oaks, dark pines, a cave, trees wrapped in ivy, laurel, grapes, and a cold stream that never ceased. Such a place was not just scenery. It was the outer shape of her spirit, stone for her resolve, water for her speed, flowers for the grace she kept hidden. She slept on animal skins, wore simple clothing, and lived by the order of hunting and water. This life did not make her crude. It stripped away useless ornaments and words. The noise of gatherings was not in her. She was a being strengthened by silence. Her name began to move beyond the mountains because of that force. Those who knew her first spoke with surprise, then with respect, of a woman who could compete with men in the hunt. Her speed was not only in her feet. She decided quickly, sensed danger quickly, and moved away quickly from words that might bind her. Yet this fame had not yet entered palaces or the great circles of heroes. She still lived in her own narrow world, among forests thought to be under Artemis's protection, known by animals and hunters. But in old Greek stories, no fame stayed still forever. A king's mistake, a goddess's anger, and a great call to the hunt would carry her into a larger scene. One morning, as Atalanta cleaned her bow, news came through the mountain roads. It brought the fear rising from the land of Calydon. Atalanta's bond with Artemis cannot be explained by hunting alone. In old poetry, women close to Artemis, such as Procris and Cyrene, belonged to the world of mountains and boughs, and Atalanta seemed a natural member of that world. Her devotion to the goddess was not simply a reason to avoid people, it was a safe way to understand herself. Against a woman's life built around marriage, hearth, and children, Artemis offered another form of womanhood, moving, seeing the target, protecting its own limits, quiet but not submissive. Atalanta did not learn this in a temple school. She learned it by following tracks in the morning, carrying a quiver, and standing alone beside water. So her decision to remain unmarried was not a dry rule. It grew naturally from her way of life. The mountain people accepted her choices, but never fully understood her. Hunters respected her skill, yet wondered why she never moved toward the softer roles expected of women. Women saw pride in her solitude. Men saw a silent challenge. Atalanta did not live apart to wound anyone. She simply felt smaller in crowds and complete in open land. Inside a house, her eyes went to the door. Outside, her shoulders lightened. Calydon's call would now pull that free body into the world of kings and heroes. The trouble in the land of Oeneus, king of Calydon, was told as the divine echo of human neglect. When the king offered the first fruits of the year to the gods, he forgot Artemis. This was more than a ceremonial mistake. It was a grave insult to the goddess of the hunt, the mountains and wild animals. Her anger did not remain silent. She sent into the land a wild boar of extraordinary size and strength. Crops were damaged, herds scattered, and people looked at the fields with fear. Oeneus understood that he could not end the disaster alone, so he called the greatest heroes of the Greek world: Meleager, Peleus, Telamon, Theseus, Castor, Polydeuces, Jason, and other powerful names set out for Calydon. Atalanta's answer to this call became one of the striking points in her legend. This hunt was not only the pursuit of an animal, it was a step into the world of heroes. When Atalanta reached Calydon, every gaze marked her at once. Among male warriors stood a woman in hunting dress, bow ready, face hardened by mountain winds. Some did not like hunting beside a woman. Atalanta knew that kind of reaction, but here the scene was larger. She faced not village men, but famous heroes. Meleager supported her presence and forced the others to accept her. That changed Atalanta's place in Calydon. She was not an unwanted shadow. She stood as a real participant in the hunt. Yet support did not make her test lighter. Now every eye turned toward her arrow, her step, and her courage. Atalanta answered the judgment of the crowd with the calm she had learned in the mountains. She only tested the string of her bow. When the hunt began, the fields, vineyards, and forest edges of Calydon became a wide space of fear. Wherever the boar had passed, soil had been turned and human order disturbed. The scene did not need harsh detail. The silence of the fields and the fear on human faces carried enough weight. When the heroes surrounded the animal, it became clear that strength alone would not win the hunt. Patience and the right moment would matter. Atalanta did not rush inside the noise. She watched not only the animal's movement, but the opening that movement would create. Then she drew her bow and sent her arrow to its mark. The old stories said she was the first to wound the boar. That first strike changed everything. Those uneasy about her presence had to see that she was not a woman being tolerated. She was a hero shaping the hunt. After Atalanta's arrow came the shot of Amphiaraus and the final action of Meleager. When the threat ended, the long fear over Calydon seemed to loosen. But in myth, the end of one danger often opens the way to another conflict. Meleager gave the hide, the prize of the hunt, to Atalanta, because the first successful blow had been hers. The decision looked like deserved honor, but not everyone accepted it. The sons of Theseus found it shameful that a woman should receive such a prize before men, and they tried to take it from her. The heart of this scene was not graphic conflict. It was the question of who had the right to be honored. Atalanta's quiet success faced the anger of male family pride. Meleager's response was heavy enough to set him against his own kin, and a shadow fell over the victory. After Calydon, Atalanta's name was no longer a distant mountain rumor. The hunt and Atalanta herself were even remembered in art, including the temple of Athena Alea at Tegea. Her achievement found a place not only in speech, but in stone and memory. For a woman to appear on the same stage as great heroes was never a simple detail in Greek myth. Atalanta entered the order of men for a time as a hunter of Artemis, but she proved her worth by her own skill, not by their permission. Still, that honor brought no lasting peace. The grief that broke out in Meleager's family darkened the triumph. Atalanta saw that the prize she received was not only a shining success, it also wounded the pride of others. Victory never came to her clean and light. When she left Calydon, she carried both fame and new knowledge of human groups. In the mountains, danger came directly through track, scent, and movement. In the world of heroes, danger hid inside praise, kinship, and honor. Even when a man defended her, behind that defense there could be desire, jealousy, or another account. So Atalanta returned from Calydon as a hero, but she was not more attached to human order. She had seen that people could draw conflict even from victory. Yet the stories did not leave her there. Her fame grew again in the games held for Peleus. This time, what would speak was not her bow, but her body and balance. The number of heroes at Calydon showed how large a stage Atalanta had entered. Castor and Polydeuces came from Lacedaemon, Theseus from Athens, Jason from Iolcus, Peleus from Phthia, Telamon from Salamis, and Amphiaraus from Argos. Each man carried not only his own body, but the reputation of his city and line. Atalanta brought no army and no brothers. She carried only her bow, the attention learned in the mountains, and the quiet trust of Artemis's world. Her presence left a deep question inside the group. Did courage and hunting truly belong only to men? The dispute over the prize made that question sharper. Meleager's gift was not only admiration, it recognized the first success in the hunt, but for the sons of Theseus, honor belonged to male inheritance, not to the one who had earned it. To them, even a woman who stood among heroes should not receive the greatest share. This showed the hidden limits of that world. Again and again in Atalanta's life, When she reached a place she had earned, others treated her presence as a disturbance. The Calydonian hunt also made her bond with Artemis public. The forgotten goddess was Artemis, and the disaster came from her realm, from a wild animal. Atalanta, raised in the mountains of Artemis, entered the crisis caused by Artemis's anger. The story does not always state this directly, but the harmony is powerful. The hunter woman carried the forgotten presence of the goddess back into the field. She did not merely join the heroes, she revealed what they had failed to see. After that, Atalanta's name carried more than speed or beauty. It carried the memory of a woman who had stood among famous men and changed the course of a great hunt. But that memory also brought new pressure. A woman who had been honored in public would not easily disappear into silence. Her fame moved from field to field, from story to story. At Peleus's games, she would enter another kind of contest, one without trees, animals, or arrows. There, on open ground, she would face Peleus himself. The funeral games held for Peleus became a field where heroes showed strength and fame before one another. In the old world, such games were more than contests after mourning. They were ceremonial moments in which the living tested themselves before the dead and carved their names into memory. Atalanta's presence there showed how far her fame had traveled after Calydon. She was no longer only a strange hunter of the mountains. She was a woman whose skill could be tested beside great men. The stories said she wrestled Peleus at the games and defeated him. That brief detail carries great weight. Peleus was not only a strong hero, he was of the line of Aeacus and would later be remembered as the father of Achilles. Atalanta, standing before him, was the quiet but firm presence of a woman demanding space on a heroic stage. The wrestling ground was different from the hunting field. There were no shadows, tracks, or dogs. There were watching eyes, sandy ground, judges, and the heavy silence of heroes. Atalanta had set aside her bow, but she was not defenseless. Her body, strengthened by running, climbing, and turning after prey, did not lose balance easily. Peleus must have approached not with easy male confidence, but with the seriousness of someone facing a real opponent. Atalanta's name could no longer be taken lightly. When the match began, her strength appeared not in a crude push, but in timing. She placed her feet carefully, waited for the weight of her opponent, and turned his movement back the moment it came. This scene showed that her speed was not only useful for running, she thought with her body. Movement did not come before decision, it was the decision itself. Peleus's defeat added another ring to her fame. The fact that old art remembered this match suggests that people wanted to keep the image of a woman overcoming a hero. That defeat did not make Peleus small. It made Atalanta larger. In Greek stories, heroes often lost to one another. But here the unsettling fact was that Atalanta was a woman. For those watching, the matter was not only who had won. A woman had entered a field built by men and claimed the right of her own body there. Atalanta did not need long speeches. Her strength in the stories often came from not explaining herself. Her actions moved first. People spoke after her. After these successes, her hidden past began to move again. The stories said that later she found her parents. The details are not broad, but the weight is clear. The woman who had grown as a daughter of mountains, hunting, and Artemis stood at last before the family that had brought her into the world and then rejected her. The name of Iasus, or in some traditions, Shoneus, became more than an old absence. It became a returning claim. Her father had not wanted her as a child. But the famous daughter was no longer a lost burden. She had become valuable. What Atalanta said at that meeting is not known, and the silence is powerful. Myths often show wounds, not by long speeches, but by bringing the same people together years later. When her father wanted her to marry, that wish was not only a return to family order. It meant handing the freedom she had received from nature over to human law. Until then, she had ruled her own body in hunt, race, and contest. Now that body was being pulled into a marriage arrangement. Here the prophecy deepened the sense of fate. Atalanta had been told to avoid marriage, or she would lose herself. Those words made her resistance more than stubbornness. Atalanta did not simply want to avoid men. Under the shadow of divine warning, she feared the loss of her identity. The self she had built in the mountains might fall apart inside a house. Her running feet might stop. The path of Artemis might be taken from her. Her father's wish for marriage therefore carried a threat as deep as the abandonment of her childhood. Atalanta answered not with argument, but with a condition. Whoever wished to marry her would have to race her. If he passed her, he would win the marriage. If he failed, he would face a heavy price. According to the stories, a stake 3 cubits high was set in the middle of the course, and the suitors were allowed to run ahead. Atalanta would then chase them armed. This showed both her trust in speed and her wish to make marriage more than an easy prize. The period of hunts and games had closed. Fate had moved on to the racecourse. The family order that called back the daughter of the mountains found the law of the mountains waiting. Anyone who wanted to reach her had first to come near her speed. Her wider place among heroes also shows that her fame did not stay within Calydon. Apollonius of Rhodes said that Jason once carried a spear Atalanta had given him in friendship. He also said she wanted to join the voyage of the Argo, but Jason kept her from it because he feared the tensions her presence might create. This detail shows that Atalanta did not enter the heroic world only when summoned. She could approach it by her own will, yet her presence among men on a shared expedition was again treated as dangerous. The same pattern returned. Her skill was accepted, her presence inspired admiration, but full entry into the male order made others uneasy. The match with Peleus was therefore more than an athletic victory. It was the visible rise of a strength often kept outside. She defeated a famous man without bow, hunting ground, or mountain advantage. Balance, speed, endurance, and calm worked together. The sand may have covered her footprints, but art and story remembered the match. Atalanta had been measured in a place where men measured one another, and she had not been found lacking. Her victory over Peleus widened the language of her movement. Her name now belonged not only to archery and hunting, but also to close physical struggle. That variety mattered. She ran, hunted, wrestled, tracked, decided, and faced society with a law of her own. So when she later set the race condition, it did not sound like an empty boast. Those who heard it already knew they faced a hero proven in more than one field. The success at Peleus's games also prepared the meaning of the marriage race. A woman who knew her body so well would not leave the decision of marriage to another person's words. Her body had always been where her freedom lived. Her father's claim would therefore have to pass through that body, through speed, breath, and open ground. When she returned to the world that had once rejected her, she did not return as the helpless child left on the mountain. She returned with a bow, a name, a history of victories, and a condition that would make every suitor measure himself against the life she had built. When the race course was chosen, Atalanta's marriage conditions stopped being rumor and became visible law. An open field was prepared, and a stake 3 cubits high was set in its center. It looked like a simple marker, but it was really a boundary driven between her father's wish and her own will. The suitors would begin there. Atalanta would give them a lead and then chase them armed. The race would measure not only the speed of 2 bodies, but the distance between a man's desire and a woman's right to remain free. When the rules were announced, everyone understood their weight. Still, her beauty, fame, and the dream of defeating her drew many men. Atalanta found no peace in that interest. She felt instead the pressure of a future closing around her. Her running now stood at the center of the new order. She allowed the suitors a head start, but she trusted her speed to close the gap. She seemed among the fastest mortals alive. To those watching, her lightness almost felt unreal, as if 2 runners could cross the sea without wet feet, or glide over grain without bending it. For Atalanta, running was the language of fate. Every step moved marriage farther away. Every breath protected her silent loyalty to Artemis. Yet this protection did not make her heart without mercy. The condition was harsh, but that harshness was the outer form of her fear. Against those who wanted to possess her, she made herself almost unreachable. The first races are not remembered one by one. What matters is that many entered the test and lost. The scene rests not on violent detail, but on the fear that gathered around the course. Suitors came trusting lineage, youth, or strength. Atalanta answered them with the same rule. They ran ahead. The crowd held its breath. Then the steps of the woman raised in the mountains sounded behind them. When her shadow fell beside a suitor, the result was understood before it was announced. The deadly condition should remain like a closing gate of fate, not a graphic spectacle. After each race, the spectators grew quieter. They were watching not only victory, but the end of a road entered through desire. The races protected Atalanta, but they did not make her lighter. Every win delayed her father's wish, yet made her name more frightening. In time, people spoke of her not only as fast, but as dangerous to approach. She had not wanted that fame. She had not caused the conflict over the Calydonian prize, nor defeated Peleus to shame men, nor set the marriage condition to destroy others. Yet in myth, a wall built for protection can look like terror from the outside. Her beauty, speed, and hard rule made her both desired and feared. Women looked at her freedom with hidden admiration. Men imagined that breaking that freedom would bring them glory. The racecourse became a show she had not sought. For her father, the situation was troubling. Her fame brought honor to the family, yet every failed suitor pushed marriage farther away. He saw that the daughter he had once refused now carried a name stronger than his own. Her presence had become something family order could not control. The crowd also wanted the races to continue. They wanted the next suitor, the next attempt, the next spectacle. The condition meant to protect her formed a new pressure around her. It made her private decision public. The abandoned child, mountain hunter, and Calydonian hero now stood at the center of a fate watched by all. These rumors finally reached Hippomenes. The young man known as noble in birth entered the story first through judgment, not love. When he heard of men who risked themselves for Atalanta, he thought them foolish. He could not understand accepting such danger for marriage to a woman. But a thing judged from far away often changes shape when seen up close. Hippomenes would learn that at the racecourse. Until then, Atalanta was in his mind only a woman with cruel conditions. But her running body, the light on her face, and her lonely stance among the crowd would undo that judgment. As he came nearer to her fate, the stake still stood in the earth and waited. There was also a strange fairness in her rule. The suitors ran first, she began behind. That showed trust in her speed, but also proved the race was not a simple trap. She did not deny all chance to those who came. She gave them an advantage at the start. Yet that advantage rarely helped against her true speed. Her armed running was remembered because it joined the marriage race to her identity as a hunter. She did not enter the field like a decorated bride. She entered like a woman from the mountains, carrying her own law. Anyone who wanted her had to know he faced not only beauty, but a warrior hunter. The prophecy from Delphi darkened the rule further. Her escape from marriage could look like a daughter's defiance, but the prophecy tied her fear to something older. The divine word had said marriage would harm her. After hearing it, she stayed with the wild and declared that any suitor would pass only through a nearly impossible test. The stake in the field marked not only the middle of the course, it marked a defense line around the prophecy. Each man who came there challenged both Atalanta and the fate she feared. Her hardness was the form of her effort to defeat that fate. But in old myths, the devices built to escape fate often become the path fate uses. As the condition spread, Atalanta's name stirred admiration and fear together. People loved to hear of her speed, yet understood what it meant for those who wanted her. Her body became a test in other people's stories. Anyone who claimed to love or desire her had to prove the value of that claim by running. This was what she wanted. Easy words of desire would not easily close over her life. The first suitors remain best understood as a group because the main point is not each man's private adventure. What matters is the fame and fear forming around her rule. Every new race meant another person accepted her law. Atalanta was no longer only fleeing. She was forcing all who approached her to meet her on the ground she chose, and that rumor would finally reach the young man who first dismissed her, then watched her with his whole being. When Hippomenes first came to the racecourse, he did not try to look different from the crowd. Doubt still lived in him. He had judged the men who ran, unable to understand why anyone would risk so much for marriage. At first, he judged not Atalanta, but the passion of the suitors. Then Atalanta appeared amid the noise of the field, and his thought changed. He did not see only a beautiful woman. He saw the attention in her whole body, the way she stood apart from the crowd, and the measured power in her movements. That simple judgment within him broke apart. The young man who had wondered why anyone would accept such danger now began to understand why danger could call a person forward. Atalanta's beauty was not still decoration. It was force inside speed. When she ran, Hippomenes watched differently from the others. The crowd looked for the result. He watched the movement itself. His eyes followed the ties near her feet, her hair swept back, and the life the race gave her body. Her speed did not hide her beauty, it sharpened it. For a moment, human form became something racing with wind, and those who watched seemed to be looking at passing light. Hippomenes did more than fall into love. He became ashamed of his earlier thought. The suitors he had condemned now made sense to him. Seeing Atalanta, he understood why they had placed safety and reason second. She was not only a prize that destroyed those who approached. She forced people to face their own courage. When the race ended, she had won again. The heavy price for losing was known, but the telling did not need hard detail. What mattered was that Hippomenes did not withdraw after seeing it. Earlier deaths should have frightened him, yet after seeing Atalanta, fear changed shape. He began to think of his lineage, strength, and name. He presented himself as a worthy opponent. He thought that if Atalanta defeated someone strong like him, she would gain greater honor than by defeating weaker men. There was pride in this, but not empty pride. He wanted to be not another suitor enchanted by beauty, but a real test for her greatness. His deepest change, however, appeared not in his words, but in the hesitation that crossed Atalanta's face. When Atalanta looked at Hippomenes, she felt something unlike what she had felt in earlier races. A quiet thought within her said that this young man should not die. She weighed his youth, courage, noble bearing, and willingness to face danger for her. She did not yet know the name of love. The old story suggests she loved without knowing she loved. That detail makes her deeply human. Even while defending her harsh rule, she did not want the person before her to be lost. She thought other women might wish to marry him, and that joining himself to her was an unlucky road. Yet inside that thought hid another wish. If only fate had not forbidden marriage, if only this man had come at another time. Atalanta's body, perfect in running, hesitated for the first time in judgment. That hesitation did not yet change the race, but it changed the story. Until then, she had seen suitors as part of a test. Hippomenes stirred in her not only rivalry, but a desire to protect. That disturbed her pride. Mercy might weaken her rule. Interest might make the prophecy real. The bond she had avoided now looked back at her from the race line. Hippomenes did not fully understand her change, but he sensed she looked at him differently. That made him bolder. Still, courage did not change the truth. To pass Atalanta by human strength alone was nearly impossible. Hippomenes had noble blood, a strong body, and resolve. But before him stood a woman trained by mountains and made swift in Artemis's shadow. While the crowd waited, he turned inward toward another power. He prayed to Aphrodite. He asked the goddess of love for help, so that the feeling she had awakened would not be wasted. This prayer showed that he would not enter the race with muscle alone. If Atalanta's speed went beyond human measure, then help beyond human power would be needed. His prayer reached the goddess, and she was moved by his sincerity. From the fertile fields of Tamassos in Cyprus, she took 3 golden apples from a sacred tree with golden leaves. The objects that would be used against Atalanta's speed were prepared. Everyone on the field would see only 2 runners, but an unseen third power now stood near them, the goddess of love. In this scene, Atalanta ceased to be only the beauty watched by others. Her inner life became visible. When Hippomenes challenged her, her mind began to speak in silence. She did not want him to die. She studied his face, courage, and lineage, trying to understand herself. She seemed to tell herself that beauty had not moved her, then admitted that his youth and fearlessness troubled her. This did not cancel the rule she had made, but it revealed the human heart behind it. She was not emotionless. Because she did not know how to name the feeling, she was even more unsettled. The way Hippomenes challenged her also mattered. He asked to be treated not as a weak rival, but as a real trial. By naming his strength and family, he said her victory over him would bring greater fame. Some suitors had seen Atalanta as a prize. Hippomenes saw her as a powerful opponent before whom he had to prove himself. That difference explains why she looked at him differently. Yet the law of the race stood. The mercy inside her could not cancel the order outside. The crowd saw only another suitor preparing to run. Atalanta's hesitation as she looked at him was a quieter but more dangerous trial than any victory before. In Calydon she had sent her arrow. Before Peleus, she had used her body. In earlier races, she had left men behind. Here, for the first time, she feared the result of her own rule. If she won, Hippomenes' fate would darken. If she lost, her freedom would change. No hunt or wrestling match had held such opposition. Her true rival was now inside her. 2 wishes struggling at once. Hippomenes' arrival brought inner division before it brought love. His own change from judgment to wonder also changed the meaning of the race for the listener. What had seemed like the madness of suitors became more understandable once Atalanta was seen. She could not be understood by her condition alone. One had to see how she ran, how she stood, and how alone she remained among the words of others. When Hippomenes' prayer was accepted, an unseen goddess entered the racecourse with him. The help Aphrodite gave Hippomenes was the great turning point of the old story. The goddess did not appear before everyone. She supported him in a way only he could understand. She gave him the 3 golden apples from the field of Tamassos in Cyprus and taught him how to use them. They were not ordinary pieces of gold. They were love, attention, and desire made visible inside the race. Atalanta's body was trained for speed. but her eye was not closed to what was bright and strange. When Hippomenes received the gift, he carried unease along with joy. The race was no longer only a test of courage. His chance to win depended on a divine trick that would turn Atalanta's attention aside. In myth, help from the gods does not always lessen heroism, but here that help carried a moral shadow. Atalanta did not know what waited for her. She knew only that Hippomenes was different from the others and that he had accepted the deadly condition. Two wishes struggled inside her, to win and to want him alive, to protect her freedom and not regret meeting him. This confusion did not make her weak. It made her more human. The old story clearly remembers that Atalanta feared the prophecy, fled marriage, and set a harsh test for suitors. But before Hippomenes, she must have felt that test more deeply. He was no longer an unknown man running with pride. He was a young man whose gaze had awakened an unfamiliar softness in her. On the day of the race, the crowd gathered as before. Her father, the people, and hopeful spectators stood around the field. To them, this race began like the others. Yet the air held another tension. Hippomenes' face carried a light mixed with fear. He knew his strength, but he also knew he could not match Atalanta by strength alone. The 3 apples hidden in his clothing were both hope and debt. That debt belonged to Aphrodite. In myths, heroes often feel gratitude when they receive help, then forget it after victory and invite disaster. Hippomenes did not yet know that future. He only approached the line and saw Atalanta look at him once more. Everyone watched her body, but her real contest had already begun inside. Her weapons and movement gave her confidence. She had made this race order herself and no one had reached her. Yet Hippomenes changed the meaning of the race. At moments when she could pass him, she delayed and looked at his face. Her will, not only her speed, was being tested. For Atalanta, the race was no longer only escape. It was encounter. Her speed could keep marriage away, but her wish for this young man to live made that same speed heavy. Her spirit had come near a love she did not yet know how to name. A goddess had named it already. Atalanta still tried to separate it among decision, mercy, and fear. When the signal came, the 2 runners moved forward. The race began with the sound of a horn. They flew across the sandy course. Atalanta's steps carried their familiar precision. Hippomenes ran more heavily, but with resolve. At first, the crowd expected the old ending. Atalanta would close the distance, and Hippomenes would follow the earlier suitors. But he carried unseen help. When his breath hardened and he felt her drawing near, he threw the first golden apple. It fell between grass and sand and caught the sun. That shine was not merely color. Aphrodite's touch reached toward Atalanta's decision. Her turn toward the first apple was one of the simplest and deepest shifts in the race. She saw it, wanted it, and left her line. The movement was small, but its meaning was large. Until then, men, her father, the crowd, and fear had not turned her from her road. Now a shining fruit had disturbed her direction for a moment. Hippomenes moved ahead, and the crowd cried out. Atalanta quickly recovered. She took the apple, increased her speed, and passed him again. That return proved she was still powerful, yet the race had changed. Even if she did not know a goddess stood behind the young man, she sensed that something inside her had divided. The first apple had fallen not only to the ground, but into her certainty. The apples from Tomassos carried the light of sacred Cyprus into the story. The place belonged to Aphrodite, and a tree with golden leaves and golden branches was said to stand there. The fruits did not seem like ornaments brought by chance. They were parts of the goddess's power. Once the apples were placed in Hippomenes' hands, the sacred power of Cyprus's golden tree entered the racecourse. Atalanta's mountain and forest world met the shine of Aphrodite, a goddess of desire, sea, and fertility. So the field held more than two runners. It held two ways of life. Because Aphrodite's help answered Hippomenes' prayer, the race also rested on a sacred exchange. A person who asked a goddess for help had to remember her after receiving it. That duty would later matter. Hippomenes' failure to understand it, or his forgetting after victory, formed the moral center of the tale. Aphrodite gave him not merely a trick, but sacred objects from her own world. Each apple he threw deepened his debt. Sincere prayer was not enough. It had to be completed by thanks. Otherwise, a gift could become a test. Here the unseen contrast between Artemis and Aphrodite sharpened. Atalanta's past belonged to the cold, open order of Artemis. Hippomenes' hope belonged to Aphrodite's power to draw and bind. The goddesses did not argue, but their powers pulled at human fate. Atalanta wished to flee and protect herself. Aphrodite made approach possible. The race became more than romance. Each step measured two divine worlds through human bodies. The secrecy of Hippomenes' help made the tension sharper. The crowd did not know the apples came from a goddess. Atalanta did not know it at the start. Only Hippomenes knew the objects in his hand were not ordinary. This one-sided knowledge pressed on him. He carried hope, but also the sense that he was not meeting Atalanta in a wholly open contest. Myth did not show heroism as clean here. It brought into the field the mixed feelings of someone trying to win. When the first apple fell, Atalanta turned not only from her path but from her certainty. The race would continue, but the line she had trusted was no longer as unbroken as before. When Atalanta moved ahead again after the first apple, the field felt different. The spectators had seen that her speed could make up the lost ground, but the unknown possibility in Hippomenes' hand had been felt. Atalanta's face showed not anger, but a sharper attention. Had the apple deceived her, or had she willingly turned toward it? The answer is not given clearly, and that is part of the myth's power. She seemed drawn by the shining object, yet she also seemed to desire it. The woman who ruled speed had for a moment yielded to the wish to possess. Hippomenes heard her coming behind him. Her steps were no longer only threat. They also seemed to carry the moral weight of his trick. As his throat dried, he understood that the apples brought responsibility as well as hope. When she passed him again, his courage might have failed. The first apple had delayed her only briefly. That showed the apples alone would not create victory. Hippomenes still had to run, endure, and choose the right moment. The goddess had given him tools, but she was not running in his place. When Atalanta's back appeared before him, he understood again how strong she was. His admiration now mixed with exhaustion. Wanting to defeat her did not mean looking down on her. It meant accepting her greatness and still trying to reach it. Yet his desire carried a flaw. Atalanta's will was being guided by a golden object. With each step, victory seemed nearer, but the purity of that victory became cloudy. The second apple was thrown with more care than the first. Hippomenes did not simply drop it in front of the path. He sent it toward a line Atalanta would have to leave the course to reach. With the second apple, he managed to place her briefly behind him again. Atalanta saw it. This time she knew what its shine could cause. Her hesitation was more conscious. One part of her wanted to keep running, pass Hippomenes, and protect her rule. Another part could not turn away from the mystery held out by the divine glow. The apple was only beautiful, but its beauty reminded her of the world of adornment, possession, and softness she had kept far away. Her life had belonged to the plainness of the mountains. The apple carried the bright world of cities, goddesses, and love. When Atalanta changed direction a second time, the crowd grew louder. Hippomenes moved ahead, but no one trusted the lead completely. Everyone knew she might speed up again. After taking the apple, she returned to the sand and gave her body back to the rhythm of the race. This return was heavier than the first. She had not only lost time, she had crossed a threshold inside herself. She had seen the trick and still turned toward it. Her own share in the choice troubled her. As the prophecy had warned, would marriage pull her away from herself? Or while trying to escape change, was she already changing? These questions did not become words while she ran, but her steps now carried not only speed, but a search for an answer. Passing Hippomenes would no longer be enough to resolve the confusion. His own exhaustion deepened. The dryness in his throat and the weight of his breath became visible. His shoulders grew heavy, and his legs lost the order of the beginning. Still, one apple remained, and the finish was near. This last apple mattered most. If he threw it at the wrong moment, Atalanta could take it and still catch him. Here Hippomenes' prayer gained meaning again. When he had asked Aphrodite for help, he had wanted not only to win, but to complete the impossible road love had opened. Yet in myth, love rarely remains innocent. It tests limits, pride, and gratitude. The final fruit in his hand was the last part of his bargain with fate. Atalanta's footsteps approached again. The crowd, breath, sun, and sand gathered into one narrow moment. When she came close for the last time, there was almost no distance between them. The stories say that when she could pass Hippomenes, she hesitated, looked at his face, and unwillingly moved ahead. That feeling became strongest in the last stretch. Atalanta now felt the bond between defeating him and losing him. At first, the race had been the shield of her freedom. Now that shield pointed toward the person she loved without knowing she loved. Holding the last apple, Hippomenes turned briefly to the goddess. Then he threw the golden fruit at a slant, toward a place that would make return difficult. The apple rolled, flashing in broken light. For a moment, the whole field seemed silent. Atalanta had two roads before her: run straight to the finish or turn toward the shine. The change Atalanta lives through between the first two apples is brief in the old story, but rich in meaning. With the first, surprise is strongest. With the second, she knows what may happen. This keeps her defeat from being a simple trick. Aphrodite's influence is present, but Atalanta is not a lifeless puppet. Her eyes shine, her steps turn aside, and then she gathers herself again. If the goddess forced everything, Atalanta's inner conflict would disappear. If Atalanta acted only by her own desire, the weight of divine power would fade. The myth holds both together. Human will and divine influence work at the same time. Hippomenes also becomes more human here. At first, he spoke of lineage and courage. In the middle of the race, he has only breath and endurance left. The dry, gasping throat shows that even with divine help, he truly passed through the trial. He was not as light or trained as Atalanta. His body was being pushed to its limit. The apples worked, but between them he spent his own strength, so the scene becomes more than a trick. The goddess helps, but the human who receives help still runs with the risk of falling, losing, and being emptied. The crowd also matters. Each apple breaks the order they expected. They had thought Atalanta would win quickly, and Hippomenes would be only a braver, defeated man. But when the golden fruits fell, their certainty broke. They saw the shine, the turn, and Hippomenes moving ahead. They did not see Aphrodite's unseen influence, Atalanta's division, or Hippomenes' debt. After the second apple, the race became a waiting measured by breath. Atalanta could still catch him. Hippomenes could still fall. The goddess's help could still fail. In a quiet telling, this tension did not need shouting. It lived in approaching footsteps, short breaths, sand, and the gaze drawn to gold. The last shine would now weigh not only the race, but Atalanta's whole fate. When the third apple fell, it carried more weight than the first two. It was strong enough to make Atalanta follow the last shine, and the time it cost her could not be recovered. This detail decided the race. In that moment, Atalanta was moving not only toward a bright fruit, but toward the unseen will of the goddess. The angle of the fall drew her farther from the path. Hippomenes saved his last strength for the finish. Fear stood on his face before victory because the result was still uncertain. When Atalanta reached for the apple, her hand moved fast, but her return was no longer as light. The fruit did not merely shine in her palm, it seemed to slow the hand that held it. For the first time, her speed faced the weight of something she had chosen. As Hippomenes neared the line, the crowd's sound rose like a wave of disbelief. People had expected Atalanta to catch him again. This time, the distance did not close. Hippomenes crossed the line and the old story's result came clear. Atalanta had been defeated. This was no ordinary loss. The woman no one had passed for years had been beaten within the rule she had made. What defeated her was not Hippomenes' speed alone. Aphrodite's gift, the pull of the apples, and the feeling Atalanta still could not fully name worked together. So the finish was not simply bright. Hippomenes lived and had won. Atalanta lost. But inside that loss, another future opened. When she reached the line, the third apple was in her hand. The image is one of the strongest in the tale. the fastest woman in the world standing still, holding the golden thing that slowed her. The old stories do not linger over the moment, but its meaning is clear. The order she had built to protect her freedom had been broken by divine help and human desire. The crowd may have seen marriage as the result. Atalanta felt the change more deeply. For years she had kept suitors away with speed. Now one had reached her not by being faster, but by drawing her from her path. Hippomenes' victory therefore carried unease. He crossed first, but only after Aphrodite had shaped the field. His courage remained real because he had run in danger. Yet his victory was not innocent, because it depended on a power Atalanta had not known. In myth, mixed victories often last longer than clean ones. They show that people rarely reach what they desire without debt. The race had ended, but the debts had not. Hippomenes owed his life and victory to Aphrodite. Atalanta owed herself a new understanding of why she had turned. Her father and the crowd might think the problem solved. The daughter would marry, the suitor had passed the test, and the frightening condition had found its exception. But the story was not finished at the line. The line opened the deeper part of the tale. The prophecy had warned Atalanta to avoid marriage or lose herself. At that moment, the warning had not fully shown its meaning. She had lost the race, but she still stood there, breathing and holding the apple. The true meaning would appear later, when desire, forgetfulness, and sacred boundaries came together. Her defeat also changes how her earlier hardness is understood. She did not create the race because she enjoyed danger. She created it because she sensed that marriage might bring a loss others could not see. With the golden fruit in her hand, she had stepped to the edge of that loss. Still, Atalanta did not become small in defeat. This is essential. She was not overcome because her strength had been false. She was overcome because gods and human feeling entered the race together. Her power remained visible because she almost repaired each delay. Even when turned aside, she returned quickly. Even when drawn away, she kept running. Her loss did not erase Calydon, Peleus, or the years in the mountains. It added another layer. She had known how to resist force, pride, and direct threat. What she could not fully resist was the shining mixture of beauty, divine will, and unfamiliar tenderness. That made her not weaker, but more human. The old myth does not reduce her to a warning about desire. It makes her a figure where freedom, fear, attraction, and fate cross. Hippomenes also changed at the finish. He was no longer the young man who had judged other suitors. He had run, faced exhaustion, used divine help, and survived. Survival made him responsible. The apples that saved him carried the name of the goddess. He could not honestly step into his new life as if courage alone had won the race. The third apple completed the rhythm of the race. The first startled. The second tested conscious choice. The third decided fate. This structure gave each fruit a different weight. If there had been only one apple, Atalanta's turn would seem sudden. If all three worked the same way, the scene would feel flat. Instead, each apple drew her farther from the path and from the life she had defended. The racecourse became a map of her inner movement. At the start, she was the woman no one could catch. At the end, she was the woman drawn step by step into another order. This did not mean she simply surrendered. Her hesitation, return, renewed speed, and final delay all showed that her will remained alive under divine pressure. That is why her defeat carries both wonder and sorrow. The apples were beautiful, the race alive, Hippomenes saved. Yet something free had been moved. The sound after the finish, therefore, could not be only celebration. The story had not given a pure rescue. It had given an answer with a shadow. Aphrodite was not finished with them when the race ended. The goddess had helped because Hippomenes prayed to her, and divine help created an obligation that could not be ignored. This truth hovered over the finish before the characters understood it. Hippomenes had won what he asked for, but he had not yet answered the power that made victory possible. Atalanta's defeat was not the final punishment, it was only the gate. Beyond it waited marriage, forgetfulness, and the anger of a goddess whose gift had been used but not honored. The last moment of the race should therefore not close too neatly. The dust had not settled over its meaning. Her father may have seen obedience at last. The crowd may have seen a marvel. Hippomenes may have felt life rush back into him, but Atalanta carried another knowledge in her body. Her feet had been faster than almost any mortal's, yet fate had found a way to make her stop. The third apple had rolled from his hand into her story, and from then on her path would no longer belong only to speed. After the race, the field held a silence unlike the one before it. Before the start, silence had meant expectation. Now it followed a result no one had believed possible. Hippomenes had survived and won. Atalanta had been defeated inside the rules she herself had made. The people could turn the outcome into celebration, but the inner weight of the scene moved more slowly. Atalanta did not become someone else at once. Her gaze still carried the distance of the mountains. Her body still remembered the rhythm of the race. Yet the law she had built around herself had been crossed. Hippomenes, with the race still in his breath, stood before a victory too large to understand. He had wanted to reach Atalanta, and now he had. But reaching her did not mean understanding the cost. The golden apples had done their work. Aphrodite's hand had opened the way. In such a moment, gratitude should have risen at once. The goddess who gave the gift should have been remembered with offering, incense, and thanks. Yet victory can fill the human mind so completely that the source of help falls into shadow. Hippomenes forgot the goddess who had saved him. From outside, the forgetting did not look loud. It was a missing gesture, an absent offering, a silence where thanks should have stood. Aphrodite did not see his failure to offer incense or clear gratitude as a small omission. She was angered by his ingratitude. In the moral world of the myth, this matters deeply. The gods might help, but they did not accept being used and then forgotten. Hippomenes' fault was not that he wanted to live or that he had asked for aid. His fault was acting as if the victory had become entirely his own. This made the brightness of the apples darker in memory. They had saved him, but they had also bound him. Atalanta was drawn into the result of a debt she had not created. This is one of the painful points of the story. She turned toward the apples, but she did not ask for them. She lost the race through a goddess who had answered Hippomenes, not her. yet she would share the consequence of his forgetfulness. The marriage that followed the race therefore carried a crack from the beginning. It did not rise from a simple victory of love over danger. It rose from divine help followed by human failure. The prophecy over Atalanta's life remained near, silent but unbroken. She had entered marriage, and the old warning now waited to reveal itself. Hippomenes and Atalanta moved away from the noise of the race and toward the next part of their fate. Some versions place the later scene in a sacred area connected with the mother of the gods. Others keep the setting more generally sacred. What matters is that the pair crossed into a place where ordinary desire was not meant to rule. The place carried a hush heavier than the racecourse. Its trees, stones, and enclosed air belonged not to human celebration, but to reverence. Yet desire, victory, and forgetfulness had already disturbed the balance around them. Aphrodite, angered by the forgotten thanks, drew them toward an act that violated the sacred boundary of that place. This part of the myth needs care. It does not need explicit detail. Its power lies in the idea that sacred silence was crossed at the wrong time and in the wrong state of mind. The pair entered not only a physical place, but a spiritual limit. What had begun as a race over marriage became a test of respect toward divine order. Aphrodite's anger did not need to shout. It worked through direction, impulse, and a path that should not have been taken. The sacred place answered with a silence deeper than human silence. In myth, such places are not empty backgrounds. They see, remember, and carry divine presence. When the boundary was crossed, the consequence came not as ordinary punishment, but as transformation. Atalanta and Hippomenes were changed into lions. The image is striking because it does not simply destroy them, it gives them another wild shape. Atalanta, who had begun life with a bear's milk and had grown in the mountains, was taken from human society again and returned to animal power. Hippomenes, who had won her through speed, prayer, and a forgotten debt, shared that fate beside her. The punishment joined them, but not as marriage had promised. They were together, yet in a form marked by divine anger and human error. The old belief that lions did not mate with each other, but only with other beasts, added another layer. The change could be heard as a union that joined them outwardly, while troubling the meaning of complete union. The image itself is enough. The woman who ran to avoid losing herself lost her human form, and the man who won her became companion to that loss. Aphrodite's anger did not erase Artemis from Atalanta's past. It made the tension between the two divine worlds sharper. Artemis had shaped Atalanta's freedom, her distance from marriage, her hunting skill, and her life in the wild. Aphrodite had brought love, attraction, and the turn of the race. The final change came after Aphrodite's gift was forgotten and a sacred space was crossed. Atalanta's fate moved from the wild maidenhood of Artemis into the dangerous binding force of Aphrodite. This does not make one goddess good and the other evil. It shows that human life can be pulled by different divine claims. Atalanta belonged to the mountains, but desire reached her. Hippomenes belonged to human courage, but prayer bound him to a goddess. Their story became tragic because neither force could be treated lightly. To ignore Artemis's warning led toward loss. To forget Aphrodite's help led toward punishment. Between those powers, people tried to run, choose, love, and remain themselves. The final image should not be rushed. Two human figures disappeared into another shape, and with that change, the racecourse, the wedding hope, the golden apples, and the father's demand all took on darker meaning. Atalanta's speed had delayed fate, but had not defeated it. Hippomenes' courage had saved his life, but had not freed him from debt. Aphrodite's gift opened the road to marriage, yet prepared punishment when forgotten. Still, something fierce remained in the form Atalanta received. She did not become small or erased. She became a lion, a creature of strength, danger, and wild presence. This did not soften the tragedy, but it kept her from being reduced to helplessness. In myth, transformation often marks loss while preserving meaning. Atalanta's human life ended in sacred silence, but the shape that followed still carried speed, watchfulness, and untamed force. The forgotten goddess had answered, and the sound of that answer would travel beyond the place where the race had ended. After the transformation, Atalanta and Hippomenes remained in memory as lions. This ending is one of the strangest parts of the myth, because it does not close the story with simple punishment. It leaves an image that keeps moving in the mind. Two lions, joined by fate and separated from human life, carry the earlier parts of the story within them. In Atalanta's lion form, the abandoned mountain child, the hunter of Artemis, the woman at Calydon, the wrestler before Peleus, and the runner who turned toward the apples did not vanish. They gathered into another sign. The form was new, but the force behind it was not. Since the beginning, she had lived close to wild animals. A bear had saved her as a baby. Hunting dogs had moved with her in youth. Wild slopes had shaped her senses. The lion form did not come from nowhere. It was punishment, but it also returned her to the non-human world that had first protected her. That return was not peaceful. It was marked by divine anger. Yet it was not meaningless. Atalanta, who had never fully belonged in a house, was again removed from human rooms and carried into the wild. Hippomenes' place in this memory was different. He had not been raised by the mountain or by Artemis's world. He entered Atalanta's life through the race, prayer, and the golden apples. In lion form, he became the companion of the fate he had helped create. His victory tied him to Atalanta. His forgetfulness tied them both to punishment. This makes him more complex than a simple lover or trickster. He was brave enough to run, wise enough to pray, and foolish enough to forget. In that mixture, he remained deeply human. The story does not make him evil. His failure was not a loud betrayal, but a dangerous incompleteness. He asked for help, received it, and let gratitude fall away in victory. That small gap opened a vast consequence. The myth feels old and severe because it understands that not every disaster begins with cruelty. Some begin with neglect, pride, haste, or a missing act of thanks. Hippomenes crossed the finish first, but he did not escape the larger course laid by the gods. The lion image also deepened Atalanta's prophecy. She had been told to avoid marriage or lose herself. At first, the warning seemed to speak of symbolic loss, freedom, movement, and the life of Artemis. The ending made it literal in mythic terms. Atalanta lost her human form. This does not mean her life was a mistake. It means the prophecy was wider than any plan she made against it. She tried to avoid marriage through racing. She set a rule nearly no one could pass. She trusted the speed that had always saved her. Yet the prophecy found a path through the race designed to block it. That path was narrow. A young man's prayer, a goddess's apples, a woman's hesitation, a forgotten debt, and a sacred boundary crossed. Each part alone may seem small. Together they became fate. The prophecy did not fall suddenly from the sky. It walked beside her through many choices. Atalanta was not passive, but her will moved in a world where divine signs and human desire made roads she could not fully see. The memory of lions changes how the earlier scenes are heard. The she-bear who fed the abandoned baby becomes more than the beginning of survival. She becomes the first sign that Atalanta's life would always stand near animal power. The Calydonian boar becomes another moment when her fate passed through the wild. The hunting dogs, bow mountain paths, racecourse, and final transformation all belong to one wide pattern. Atalanta's life moved between human law and animal force. She was born into a family, thrown into the wild, raised by hunters, brought among heroes, pushed toward marriage, and finally returned to animal shape. In this pattern, the animal world is not simply lower than the human world. It protects, tests, threatens, and preserves memory. The lion form carries danger but also dignity. It tells the listener that Atalanta's end was not an erasure into weakness. It was a severe translation of her life into another sign. In her human body, she had already seemed partly made of speed and wilderness. In the end, the myth made that visible. Still, the ending remained tragic. The dignity of lion form did not undo the loss. Atalanta could no longer stand as the woman who chose her own road in human speech. Hippomenes could no longer repair his forgotten gratitude. The sacred boundary could not be uncrossed. The two figures that remained were powerful, but their power was shaped by punishment. The story should not be softened into a simple return to nature. Atalanta returned to the wild, but not as she had once chosen it. She returned under divine sentence. That difference matters. In youth, the mountains had given her space. After the transformation, the wild received her as fate's final form. The sadness of the ending rests there. Atalanta had fought to keep herself from being taken by another order, and yet she was finally taken by one beyond human reach. The old myth does not mock this. It holds the image quietly. The lions move through memory, and the listener understands that beauty, courage, speed, and love were all real. But none were enough to escape gods, prophecy, and the unstable human heart. The story also leaves open the question of what Atalanta truly chose. Did she choose the apples, or did Aphrodite lead her? Did she love Hippomenes, or was love placed inside her? Did she lose because she was deceived, or because something in her answered a call she had refused for years? The myth does not resolve these questions neatly. Its power lies in keeping them together. Her hand moved toward the apple. Aphrodite's will moved through it. Hippomenes threw it. The prophecy waited behind the result. No single cause explains everything. This layered cause makes ancient myth different from a simple moral lesson. It does not say only that pride is punished or desire is dangerous. It shows a life where freedom and fate are tangled. Atalanta is strong and still she is moved. Hippomenes is brave and still he is indebted. Aphrodite helps and still she punishes. Artemis protects through distance, yet cannot prevent the final turn. The lions carry all of this without speaking. Their silence is full because it holds the unresolved questions of the whole tale. In the end, memory did what human life could not. It kept Atalanta whole by holding together all her forms. The child, hunter, hero, runner, bride, and lion did not cancel one another. They formed one long movement. It began with a baby abandoned on a mountain and ended with a wild shape moving beyond human settlement. Between those points, Atalanta crossed the great concerns of the old world: family, gender, divine warning, public honor, bodily strength, desire, gratitude, and sacred law. That is why she remained memorable. She was not only the fastest woman, she was the woman whose speed revealed the limits of speed. She could outrun men, but not prophecy. She could defend herself against force, but not fully against the glittering call of love and the gods. She could shape the rules of the race, but not the final rule of the story. The lion form became a dark seal over that truth. Still, inside that seal, Atalanta did not disappear. Her name remained in motion, as if the ground beyond the tale still remembered her feet. The golden apples are the brightest objects in Atalanta's story, but their brightness should not make them seem simple. They are not only clever tools that help Hippomenes win, they are signs where desire, divine help, choice, and debt meet. Atalanta's life before the race had been shaped by distance, from her father's house, from marriage, from men who wanted to possess her, and from the ordinary order of women's lives. The apples broke that distance by being small, beautiful, and placed in her path. They did not stop her by force. They made her turn. That difference matters. A wall can block a runner, but an apple invites the eye. Atalanta's defeat came not because something struck her down, but because something called to her. Fate does not always arrive as thunder, battle, or command. Sometimes it appears as a small brightness lying just outside the line one meant to follow. For Hippomenes, the apples meant hope. Without them, he had almost no chance of passing Atalanta. His prayer to Aphrodite was the prayer of someone who understood that human effort alone would fail. Yet the hope he received was not free. In myth, every divine gift creates a bond with the giver. The apples became a bond between Hippomenes and Aphrodite. When he threw them, he was not using objects without history. He was using sacred things taken from the goddess's own fertile world. That made his later forgetfulness serious. If the apples had been ordinary tricks, forgetting thanks might seem small. Because they came from Aphrodite, the forgetting became a sacred failure. Hippomenes won through the goddess, and then failed to complete the exchange through gratitude. Each apple helped him live, but each also deepened the debt that would return. The race was won step by step, and the punishment was prepared step by step. The apples were not only instruments of victory, they were seeds of consequence. For Atalanta, the apples meant a crack in certainty. She knew how to face visible threats, the centaurs who approached by force, the boar of Calydon, the pride of male competitors, and the pressure of her father. The apples asked a different question. They did not attack. They tempted. They appeared as beauty. They asked whether the woman who had refused ornament, softness, and possession would turn aside for something bright. Atalanta's response was not simple weakness. It revealed a part of her life she had kept outside her chosen identity. Raised in mountain plainness, devoted to Artemis, and trained for speed and defense, she had built herself against marriage and adornment. The apples carried the shine of that rejected world, but also Aphrodite's power. When she turned toward them, she touched not only gold, but another possible life. That life frightened and drew her at once. The apples became mirrors. Each reflected a desire she did not fully understand. Atalanta's tragedy begins there. She lived as if escape were right, yet the person before her and the goddess's gift disturbed the line of that escape. This did not make her smaller. It pulled her out of the shape of an unbeatable symbol and made her one of myth's most living women. The shine of the apples on the grass is visually strong, but it is not only outer beauty. Each apple creates a small turn away from her path. In a race, small turns decide the result. In a life, they can do the same. Atalanta's life had begun with great breaks, taken from home, left on the mountain, separated from human order, and turned toward Artemis. The turns in the race move the other way. This time, she is drawn from nature and solitude toward human bonds. The apples therefore represent the second great change of direction in her life. The first came through her father's will. The second came through divine help and her own uncertain desire. They reveal not only Hippomenes' victory, but the turning points of Atalanta's fate. The symbol grows more painful at the end of the story. Hippomenes continues into life through the apples without thanking Aphrodite. The source of the objects that carried him to the finish is forgotten. Atalanta shares the consequence. At first, the apples looked like a gift of love. In the end, they became reminders of divine debt. That is why love in this story is never simply a sweet rescue. It comes with speed, freedom, pride, gratitude, and sacred boundary. The golden apples are the brightest surface of that whole pattern. The fruits remain beautiful in the listener's mind, yet deep in the story, they whisper a warning. When a person wins what he desires, danger begins if he forgets how he won it. When Atalanta held the apples, she held not only the race but that truth. It is also important not to confuse these apples with other golden apples in Greek myth. Here they are the fruits Aphrodite brought from Tamassos in Cyprus. They are not simply the apples of the Hesperides. Their function is love's intervention in a race, not a hero's search for immortality. The apples also show how strongly ancient stories understood sight. Atalanta's speed depended on direct attention, eyes on the path, body on the line, will on the finish. The apples changed her by changing what she looked at. A turned gaze became a turned life. The myth gives enormous power to a brief visual moment. The listener can see it, the body still moving forward, the eye caught by gold, the foot leaving the line, the hand reaching down. The whole race turns on that small change. This is why the tale works so well when spoken. It gives one clear image and lets that image carry meaning far beyond itself. The apple does not explain. It shines, rolls, waits, and changes the course. Atalanta does not need a speech. Her step is enough. The myth trusts movement to carry thought. That is why the golden apples remain at the center of the tale. The prophecy over Atalanta's life was short, but its shadow was long. She had been told to avoid marriage or lose herself. At first, that warning seemed to explain her life in the mountains, her devotion to Artemis, and the harsh condition of the race. She did not reject marriage only because she preferred solitude. She rejected it because divine speech had tied marriage to the loss of identity. Every suitor, therefore, became more than a man seeking a bride. Each became a doorway into the danger foretold by prophecy. Atalanta's speed was a defense against fate as much as against marriage. Every race she won seemed to push the prophecy away. Every suitor she left behind seemed to prove she could keep herself. Yet myth often turns the tool of escape into the road of fulfillment. The race condition was meant to protect her from marriage. Instead, it brought Hippomenes to the line. It brought Aphrodite into the story. It brought the golden apples into her path. The prophecy did not break in from outside. It entered through the gate Atalanta herself had built. The prophecy also gives meaning to her inner conflict before Hippomenes. Without it, her hesitation might look like ordinary romantic uncertainty. With the prophecy, hesitation becomes dangerous. To want Hippomenes alive was already to stand near the warning. To turn toward the apples was to move closer to a future she feared. Atalanta's heart did not open in a harmless world. It opened in a world where love and loss had already been tied together by divine speech. That is why she feels so tense. She was not afraid of love in a childish way. She feared that love might demand the surrender of the self, built from abandonment, wilderness, skill, and silence. At the raceline, she carried all of that. The baby saved by the bear, the girl raised by hunters, the servant of Artemis, the woman among heroes, and the daughter pressured by the father who had once rejected her. Marriage threatened not one part of her, but the whole shape of her life. The prophecy made that threat sacred. After the race, when Hippomenes won, the prophecy still had not fully shown itself. Atalanta had not yet lost her human shape. She had lost the condition that protected her. This in-between moment matters because fate unfolds in layers. Her defeat opened the first layer. Marriage became possible. Hippomenes' forgetfulness opened the second. Aphrodite was angered. The sacred boundary opened the third. Transformation came. Only then did the prophecy reveal its most severe form. Atalanta lost herself not only as a free unmarried woman, but as a human being. This should not make her fear seem foolish. It suggests the opposite. She had sensed danger correctly, even if she could not know its final shape. Her life had been an attempt to preserve herself against a future reaching toward her from beyond ordinary sight. The tragedy is that preservation required the public world of races and suitors, and that very world gave fate the scene it needed. The prophecy also changes how her father's role is understood. His wish for marriage was not only a practical family decision, it stood against the warning that shaped Atalanta's life. Whether he understood that warning or not, his pressure pushed her closer to what she feared. His earlier rejection sent her to the mountain, where nature saved her. His later desire to claim her through marriage pulled her back toward human law. In that way, the father's actions frame her life. First he casts her out, then he calls her back. Atalanta's race condition answered both actions. She would not simply submit to the father who had abandoned her. She would set the terms by which any man could come near. That decision gave her agency, but agency in myth does not always guarantee escape. It can shape the way fate arrives. Her law of the race is a clear example. It was hers, strong and reasonable within her world. Yet through divine help, it became passable. The prophecy did not make her passive, it made her struggle meaningful. Hippomenes' place under the prophecy is also complex. He did not know all of Atalanta's inner history as the narrator does. He saw her, admired her, and wanted to win her. Yet by praying to Aphrodite, he unknowingly set in motion the very power that would help fulfill the warning. His love, or the beginning of love, did not protect Atalanta from loss. It helped create the road toward it. This does not mean love itself is evil in the story. The myth is subtler. Love is powerful, but it cannot be separated from gratitude, respect, and sacred limits. Hippomenes fails not by loving Atalanta, but by forgetting the divine source of the aid that made winning possible. Under the prophecy's shadow, that forgetfulness becomes more than a personal flaw. It becomes one of the last links in a moving chain. Atalanta's hesitation, the apples, his victory, the forgotten thanks, and the sacred violation gather under the old warning. The prophecy is like a low sound beneath the story. It is not always heard clearly, but it vibrates through every turn. The shadow of the prophecy gives Atalanta's story its lasting sadness. She is not punished because she is foolish. She is someone who tries, with every means she has, to remain herself. She trusts the mountain, Artemis, her bow, her speed, and her own rule. She succeeds again and again until another kind of power enters the course. That is why her fall remains moving. She had earned the right to be remembered as strong before she was remembered as defeated. The prophecy does not cancel her strength. It shows the limit even strength can meet in the mythic world. She outruns men, hunts with heroes, defeats a famous warrior, and sets the terms of marriage. Yet the divine word remains wider than all of this. The story does not ask the listener to despise her for losing. It asks the listener to feel the depth of a world where no human gift, however great, stands outside fate. Her speed, courage, fear, and hesitation were all real. The prophecy gathered them into a pattern she could not fully see until the end. Atalanta's story began on a mountain and ended by turning again toward the wild. This return gives the tale its deepest echo. As a child, she was rejected by human order and saved by an animal. As a woman, she resisted human marriage and lived under the law of Artemis. As a figure of punishment, she was changed into an animal shape and removed again from ordinary human life. These three movements are not the same, but they speak to one another. The first return to nature was rescue. The second life in nature was choice. The final return was sentence. The sadness of the ending lies in that difference. The forest that once kept her now received her in another form. The baby had no voice and no choice. The young hunter had voice, skill, and direction. The transformed lion had power but no human speech. Atalanta's fate moves in a circle but not a simple one. It carries growth, resistance, love, error, divine anger, and loss. The final forest is not the first forest, it remembers everything between. The fate that returned to the forest also gathered the story's landscapes into one memory. Mount Parthenion, the hunting slopes of Artemis, the fields of Calydon, the games for Peleus, the racecourse with its stake, and the sacred place crossed in anger, all seemed to lead toward the same wild silence. Atalanta had lived by movement, and the story honors that movement by refusing to keep her in one fixed identity. She is not only a princess, hunter, runner, bride, or punished figure. She is all of these in sequence. The forest at the end has room for that complexity. Human society tried to name her through roles: daughter, wife, prize, danger, wonder. The wild remembered her more broadly. It remembered her feet, her arrow, her strength before Peleus, her hesitation before the apples, and the silence after transformation. That is why the final return feels both tragic and fitting. It does not free her from punishment, but it prevents her from being reduced to her father's terms or her suitor's claims. In the forest, she remains larger than them, though still marked by the gods. Hippomenes beside her makes the final image more sorrowful. Without him, Atalanta's return to the wild might seem like the closing of her own circle. With him, it becomes the memory of shared consequence. He came from outside the mountains. He judged, admired, prayed, and won. He had no part in her first abandonment, but he became part of her final transformation. Their fates met through the race and stayed joined through punishment. This joining is not the easy fulfillment of marriage. It is the darker truth that winning another person can also mean sharing the weight that follows. Hippomenes did not only gain Atalanta, he became bound to the divine debt his victory created. Atalanta did not only lose to him, she became tied to the result of his forgetfulness. The story therefore refuses a simple romantic ending. It gives closeness, but closeness under judgment. The two lions moving into the forest carry that truth. They are together, yet their togetherness is marked by what was missed, forgotten, and crossed. The apples made union possible, but did not promise peace. The final return also asks the listener to rethink Atalanta's freedom. Was she most free in the mountains before fame reached her? Was she free when she set the race condition? Was she free when she turned toward the apples? Or was every form of freedom already surrounded by forces beyond her? The story gives no single answer. In childhood she had no choice, yet nature kept her alive. In youth she chose the wild, yet society and prophecy waited. In the race she made the rules, yet Aphrodite changed the field. After transformation she moved in wild strength, but under divine sentence. Her freedom was therefore never absolute, but it was never unreal. Her choices mattered. They shaped the story, even when they could not defeat fate. This balance keeps her from becoming only a victim of the gods. She is a figure of will moving inside a world of limits. Her speed does not give complete control, but it reveals how strongly she resists control. The forest at the end holds both truths, her loss and every step by which she tried to remain herself. The ancient story also leaves a question about memory. What do people remember most about Atalanta? Some remember the abandoned child saved by the bear. Some remember the hunter at Calydon. Some remember the woman who defeated Peleus. Many remember the race and the golden apples. Others remember the lion form. The full story asks that none of these be separated. Without the child on the mountain, the hunter's independence is less clear. Without the hunter, the race condition might look like cruelty. Without the race, the apples lose their force. Without the apples, Hippomenes' debt disappears. Without transformation, the prophecy remains unfinished. Her life is a chain, and each link gives meaning to the next. A careful telling must let the story move from beginning to end without cutting away the slower parts. The mountain scenes, public victories, father's pressure, race, divine gift, and final punishment belong to one shape. Atalanta is remembered not because one event is strange, but because each event leads naturally to the next. Her fate returned to the forest because the forest had been present from the beginning. When the last sound of the story softens, Atalanta remains not as a defeated woman, but as a moving question. What can a person keep when family, society, desire, and the gods all claim a part of the self? Atalanta answered with speed, silence, skill, and her own law. These answers carried her far. They made her famous, feared, and dignified, but they did not make her untouchable. That is the sadness and greatness of the myth. It does not promise that strength saves a person from every fate. It shows that strength shapes the way a person meets fate. Atalanta met it running. She met it with a bow in her hand, with her feet on the ground, and with her eyes open to the shine that would change everything. When she was finally carried back into the wild, the story did not close like a sharp ending. It lowered its voice. The grass seemed to remember the apples. The trees seemed to know the child they once hid. Beyond the last spoken word, the forest kept a silence that sounded almost like footsteps moving away. When Atalanta's story ended, 3 images remained. The child protected in the mountain's darkness, the woman turning toward the golden apple on the racecourse, and the 2 lions withdrawing into the forest. These 3 images carry her whole life more strongly than long explanation could. In the first, nature accepts what a human rejects. In the second, even the firmest will is tested by a small brightness. In the third, when divine help is forgotten, even victory carries a heavy price. Atalanta is therefore remembered not only as the fastest woman in the world, but as someone who tried to protect her freedom, opened a place for herself among heroes, and did not easily fall apart even before love. The meaning of the golden apples also keeps shining in this memory. They are a trick, but not only a trick. They are a gift, but not only a gift. They open the door to love, yet they show that when gratitude is forgotten, that door can become a dark threshold. When Atalanta gathers them, she is not erased, but her road changes. When Hippomenes uses them, he not only survives, he becomes indebted to the goddess. Aphrodite does not let that debt vanish in silence. The three small fruits become bright signs of the delicate balance among human desire, divine help, and fate. When the race ends, Hippomenes crosses the line. But what remains in the listener's mind is why Atalanta hesitated at the final moment. As a legend told into the night, Atalanta's path closes not with noise but with an echo that slowly grows. This story needs no harsh detail because its real weight lies in choices, silences, delayed gratitude, and one brief turn aside. The mountain, water, bough, race line, golden apples, and forest silence all speak for themselves. Atalanta's final form is tragic, yet she does not remain in the story as a defeated shadow. She is the woman who measured the world by her own speed until she was caught. And even when the story falls silent, the small light that once shone over the grass stays quietly in the mind of everyone who has listened to her steps. I hope that as you end your day, this ancient epic has been a good story for you. I look forward to your comments and requests. Do not forget to follow my channel. May the darkness of the night and the rhythm of the sea bring you peace. Until we meet again in another legend, in the breath of another hero. Love.